Am I alive? Let's see if I'm alive. Okay, so I do seem to be alive. Can you hear me? Can yins hear me? Hello? I think you might be able to hear that. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, we'll give another minute or two for people to wander in. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Good evening. Guten Abend. Guten Abend. All right, so my cat's just decided to use the litter box. Just 1 second, please. He'll dig a spot that, keep digging like he's going to Australia, and he'll do his business and everything. He won't bother covering it up. Anyway, that's the problem with America today. We don't follow through on things. Let's see our book, our calendar. Anyway, so good evening, everybody. We had some people answer the poll, and I only put up 2 selections, and I was kind of hoping that maybe somebody would add something different, but that's okay. And we can also do stream of conscience right after we're done with the major parts here. All right, so the first topic is this tower ritual, and the sad thing is I kind of wish Michelle and Victoria and Larry were here, because I think Michelle and Vic actually have a little bit better of a handle on my own idea than I do, and that's partially because they knew what tower time was long before I did. This actually is like it's one of those moments where I think that we recognize that there's a lot of other traditions out there besides heathenry, and we're not all the same. Obviously, we have stark differences among us, but we also have the same challenges, and we do have some. There's usually like some undercurrent of something that we can all relate to, and for me, this tower time concept, which came from, no, Stacy, I mean, literally here in my house so they could be on the camera. Because otherwise they can only type out what their thoughts are. But, so, generally speaking, I am an optimist. Like a utopian, we can all, if we all just work together, we can all, But, this whole virus thing and like the precursors to it, that like those of us who have any sensitivity knew there was something wrong, but I wasn't paying attention, and that's why I always said back and forth that Bertha was kicking my ass, and she was, but it's funny. I thought about this whole day what I was going to say, and now it's all going out of my mind. But these towers, these figurative towers, are pulled from the tarot deck. Let me get one. The Tower. Rapunzel. Get my left and right screwed up. And the towers represent, from what I'm understanding, the okay, there's no sound. But anyway, so the tower represents some things that are obstacles, I guess, or in our way, or are impeding change or something. Kind of like the establishment, maybe. And if anybody wants to add to that, please type it into the chat window and other folks can read it. Because I've never done tarot cards. I do runes instead. But, our hoggle, in Pennsylvania tradition, we actually have our own rune system is badly broken. There's some flagrant errors in it, and I really don't think it's all that old. I think it's probably like somebody got hold of some younger Futhark things 150 years ago or something. I don't know how they got it, but I suspect that. But however, runes are the basis of some hex signs and some other symbols, and it's so we do use it, we take it into account, but we haven't finished working on it yet. But the Hoggle rune is the Hagalah's equivalent, and that is the rune that's most closely associated with Holla. Those of you who know about the Pennsylvania lore about hailstones, hailstones can be destructive, but they can also be nourishing, and the first hailstones that fall in the spring, any hail that are in a year, it's usually, actually, I think we got ours in January last year. But okay, so the first hailstorm that happens in a new year, which it could be all the way up to December or never, but you're supposed to gather some of those stones. You're supposed to put them in your freezer, and they will bring you luck from Holla. But now, another thing that they do in some areas is they'll melt the hailstones and then they'll drink them. I don't know if I would do that, but then again, I used to eat snow, so why not? And with all the airplanes out of the sky right now, it's probably really a good time to actually, eat things that fall from the sky. I'm just joking. All right, yeah, Hoggle. Michelle's typing in here. The way she looks at it, that Hoggle is offensive driving, and I don't think she means on the New Jersey highways, but which is the default, by the way. And I'm one of those people from the Pennsylvania side. Anyway, so the Hoggle rune is actually, it looks more like the younger Futhark than it does the elder Futhark, but I'm going to draw it out. hagel. Come on. I watch the pen won't work. Let's see. So it looks kind of like that. Okay, and some people believe that this is where the 6-point rosette hex sign might actually have its origin. And if you don't know what that one is, 1 second please, I'm going to show you. Hopefully you can actually see it. But this sign right here has 6 points on it, and now in this case, that hex sign usually refers to protection and clearing, and but then again, hailstorms also do clear the air a bit, so they could be related. I actually I badly want them to be. I would love to somebody be able to prove that the hagel rune and that rosette hex sign are definitely related. But you know, there's rosette hex signs in other cultures as well, and it's possible that they spilled over from somewhere else. I don't know if they're all lopsided like ours is, though. Ours isn't always presented that way, where it's I'm not going to draw the rosettes because I can't draw for anything. So it's like, yeah, it really does look like that, doesn't it? So 1, 2, 3 versus, it would be lopsided either way, but it's standing on 2 legs. Standing on 2 legs. I have enough trouble with my left and right without a dominant hand as it is. This is really confusing me on the it's standing on 2 legs rather than 1. And some places, I think the Christians use this symbol a lot too, but standing on its on 1 leg. Let's see. And so, anyway, back to what I was saying. So the connections are weak, but it is possible, you know, that the hex sign and the rune are related to each other. I badly want them to be, but we can't really prove it. However, we also can't not prove it. So, I'm willing to go on a theory until more evidence comes along. All right. So anyway, now I forget where I was with that. We were talking about. Oh boy, I really segued there. See, without Michelle, Larry, or Victoria here to say, psst, stay on topic. I go off topic. So we got the hagel rune, the runes. Anyway, all right. So, okay. So the tower. So I was reading something that Byron Ballard, who coined the phrase "tower time," had written, and I saw in it some of the things that kind of, they're not explicitly stated in Urglaawe theory, but they are definitely there. Establishment issues, things that are old that need to be swept away but aren't. The big four that we have in Urglaawe, the big 4 social problems are apathy, ignorance, unenlightened self-interest, and just basic and apathy, rootlessness, man, I'm drawing a blank. Ignorance, apathy, and rootlessness, plus then this unenlightened self-interest. That's the unenlightened self-interest is kind of like that woman who went into the grocery store and coughed all over the meat just to freak everybody out about the COVID-19. That would be like she did it on a lark, entertain herself. So those are big problems, and we all know that something big should have happened already. I don't know exactly why, but everything's been pretty bad. I mean, times have always been tough. You know, everybody sees the toughness in the context of their own lives. I'm quite sure that my grandparents' lives really sucked during World War I as German-speaking people, or Pennsylvania Dutch-speaking people. And I'm quite sure, because I know this for a fact, that my mother had a tough time also when her school caught fire. Actually, somebody blew it up, or something happened that blew it up, and she had to go to a different school a few miles up the road where Pennsylvania Dutch country pretty much ended, and most of the kids in that school were of Russian and Ukrainian descent and Polish, and the Germans were at war with them, and they hear Pennsylvania Dutch, they think German, even if we had been well split for excuse me, well split for quite some time by that point. Okay, so these towers, we see them, I personally see them on multiple levels. We have our personal towers that we each need to confront, and often do, although some of us have these nattering towers that just won't quite go away. Then we have like the community towers. For instance, where I live, I think one of the towers that we have in my town is that the Democrat Party in this town has two factions, and they're family-based, and they hate each other. And so every year it turns into something in the primaries where they're each running a candidate, and it becomes a nightmare. And so both these families are ensconced in this constant tug of war, and I really just don't think it serves us all that well. It's actually kind of annoying, and I am the judge of elections, by the way, and so I'm not naming the families. But so our nattering towers in the community also might need to go, to be, they're already crumbling in some places, but the big ones for us, I think, are the states, the federal government, the global issues, and the cosmic issues. And when we develop this ritual, which Michelle, Larry, Victoria, Stacy, and that's Stacy Beisch and Stacy Stewart, and Byron Ballard are going to be working on this together. And it's still in evolution. I actually think that we're going to just let some of the towers crumble, Pietism, and deal with it. We have to prepare and respond to what we know is coming. I think one of the biggest things in this whole COVID-19 thing is just the fact that the masks that people can use during SARS, and I don't remember there being a huge quantity of masks being used, but I saw in the news last night that a whole bunch of these masks have been used, and then they were never resupplied afterwards. But somebody should have known this stuff. Diseases have killed more people than anything, and it just kind of irritates me that we were so ill-prepared that we're now the #1 country with this. And it's still a slow-moving horror, as Paul Mercurio had said. And that's a tower. We need to bring the towers of some of these issues that are holding our society back. We can be. Look, I'm very proud to be American. Are we perfect? No. Do I recognize now, as an older adult, that all the stuff we heard in school when I was a kid was all propaganda? Yeah, and not much different from Soviet propaganda. Although, every morning you're supposed to say the Pledge of Allegiance at school, and I kind of wish that were removed. Our school actually doesn't do it, but because that would be a problem for me. I don't like children being forced to say something that is essentially an oath that they may not be understanding, and because one nation under God, that loses me right there. And if I were pledging my allegiance literally, it would be to the Constitution, not to the flag, even though the flag represents that. I'm off in the weeds again. So we have a lot of these towers. And I think we're probably going to invite people to confront their personal towers during the month of April, and then on April 30th, we'll do some sort of ritual. I'm not sure whether it's going to be one that involves the whole community, or whether it involves just a few of us, or what. But I think I would like people to be able to access it if possible. But we really haven't seen where this is going yet. Getting Seek Dog ready took a lot of time, particularly since all of a sudden I was told that we would start working remotely with our students, and that kind of diverted me a little bit. So anyway, so April 30th is when we're planning on doing this. That's actually Walpurgisnacht, and I'm actually tying it to Walpurgisnacht because Walpurgisnacht is a term that goes across traditions, as opposed to our Wonnezeit, which starts at sundown that night. Now, Michelle said, I pose this question often. Does interfering with the downing of the towers potentially worsen the situation? I feel like it could. It's best to simply get out of the way and protect ourselves and one another. And, and that's a funny thing, because some towers, I think, do need to be brought down, especially personal towers, because people get stuck in ruts and old ways. The social ones are a little bit harder. Because, unfortunately, most revolutions or most major changes in a society don't tend to be really all that pleasant. And having lived in Yugoslavia just before their civil war started, and thus knowing a lot of people who were in it and quite a few who were killed in it, I really don't want a civil war. I would like to have some sort of control over it, as a society. But unfortunately, I feel like most of us are so far removed from our political system. Even if we voted in every election, most of us know that certain names or certain families or amounts of money can weigh out the great ideas of the population. I don't know if it's that way everywhere. I think it is that way pretty much everywhere. But that's not what this country is supposed to be. But we're so big that it's kind of hard to really have some of these conversations with our politicians, especially if they don't want to listen. So it's not that if I don't. Well, yes, like Victoria just said here, society has given that option up through general apathy. And so one must ask, where does that general apathy come from? That general apathy has a lot of... Oh boy, hold on. There's another conversation here. I'm going to harken back to this in a minute, where we're talking about normal. Normal, I don't think we're going right back to normal. I'm hoping that there are some lessons that we could learn out of this. First off, preparedness, and people were more prepared for peak oil than they were for this disease. And peak oil, hasn't really happened, particularly since we have all this Marcellus shale stuff that they can get natural gas from. But I do think we're coming to the end of some cycle. It may not be some huge cosmic cycle, but this is a world calamity. The deaths aren't nowhere near the flu every year, but I think it's the fact that it's a novel disease and there is really nothing to mitigate it. Well, they're saying that lupus medicine, but that was only originally tested on 36 people. I think that's what Doug said. And that's not a whole lot. So, normal. Once this is over, are you going to be able to go up to salad bars and, get all, throw all this stuff on your plate? Yeah. And now Stevie makes a good point here about the apathy. And I do feel about this too. I think that a lot of the apathy comes from the fact that we're almost purposely distracted. Governments tend to like a population that doesn't resist. I hate to sound jaded, and it almost sounds like conspiracy, but once a government gets in there, it tends to build itself up and to protect itself. And our government is not the only problem. We have a global issue of inequalities and wars, wars that, like the ones that our ancestors left Europe from. If you happen to read any of the posts in the Urglaawe group about all the wars that were taking place in the 1500s and the 1600s, they were all taking place right in the center of Europe, so they were all falling in the German lands, and the Palatinate seemed to be one of the places that they like to go to trash. And so we have just a bunch of towers that we need to figure out which towers we're addressing, and we need to figure out how we're going to address it. And so with that, if anybody has any questions, please type them into the chat room, because I think Michelle and Victoria and Larry may have some better insights on this than I do. I had the idea. The idea came to me, I believe, from Berkta, and then was followed up by Michelle. Ended up having an experience with Holla too that kind of matched it. So this is a UPG-based ceremony, but I think we can get something out of it. Right? So any questions that you can type in the chat room? Or Michelle or Vic, do you have anything else to say? All right, it looks like nobody's saying anything, so, all right. So what's my second topic? Wonnezeit. Wonnezeit. Okay, so most of us know, well, I think, that April 30th is Walpurgisnacht, and that's the night of the witches, And that term is carried into modern paganism, but it's derived from Saint Walburga of Nivelle, I think that's how it's pronounced, and I really didn't want to bring a Christian name into what actually is a major observance. And fortunately, I didn't have to, because some practitioners already had a different term for it. They referred to the witches' dance that is said to take place at a particular spot here in Pennsylvania that I'll elaborate on in a minute. They call that the Wonnetans, or the Dance of Joy. And I'm going to type that into Wonnetans. And if you go out to Dutch Mythology blog, which is Dutch Mythology blogspot.com, you can actually find the Wonnezeit myth up there. It's actually a nice little story with quite a bit of pieces of lore that turn up in other places too. All right, so essentially what this observance is this is Holla's return from the wild hunt. And rather confusing sometimes, although it actually makes sense to us, and that discussion we had in Urglaawe Live today really made a lot of sense, where at Allerlievetzeel, during Allerlievetzeel, Holla goes out on the wild hunt, and Berkta rules this realm. That's called the dark half of the year. And that dark half of the year ends at Walpurgisnacht, and or Wonnenacht, and they kind of switch roles. Berkta, she goes and guards the spirits that are coming out of the mill and being prepared for new lives down in Onogegen, and Holla's ruling the physical world. It's an interesting thing, but having a goddess rule the physical world at one time of the year and then not rule it at another time of the year, I think that what we're doing there is we're kind of using our own way of understanding what she'd be doing here. Quite honestly, I think that they all kind of have a say over it all the time, whether they're physically present in or materially present in this world or not. And So the stories kind of begin with the hunt coming through, and on April 30th. Now, in most Brauerei practice, they will tell you April 30th, and they follow the solar day, but we follow the lunar day. So for us, it's actually sundown on April 30th because the real day that we're actually observing is actually May 1 or May Day. April 30th is the start of it because that's the night before. So after sundown on April 30th, you put up signs on your windows saying "Welcome Hola," and open up all your doors and windows all day long if you can, if it's safe. If you can't, you can do some like maybe upper level windows and keep your lower level windows closed, because the wild hunt is supposed to pass through, and Hull is inspecting and looking for order. And that's actually a very old myth. I think the Germans might have it, still, but we know that that's been here since the colonial era, and that the Brauerei guilds keep that going, and we actually take it seriously. Now, those of you who know me well know that I was busy for many years, and my house didn't always get tended to so much. And every year I was making huge offerings to Holla to please, not murder me in my sleep for how my house appeared. Luckily, we cleaned the house last year, and so we haven't had to put the offerings out the same way. We still do it anyway. So the hunt passes through, and we actually have 3 places that it's mentioned that it lands here in Pennsylvania. Which one comes first? First one is Hexafeld, which is a place in Lancaster County near Reinholds. I think I actually found it a few 2 years ago. Its exact location isn't really disclosed, but we do know it's on private land. Teresa, the offerings really do work. It's not necessarily neat per se. It's more just is stuff where it can be reached. Is stuff like, do you know where things are? I mean, you open up my drawers and all bets are off. But what? Yes, Peanut Gallery just yelled out, "You know it." Yeah, but it's one of those things. This is when spring cleaning ends. So the whole order starts at Entstehung and runs until Walpurgisnacht. Well, folks, I can't answer text messages right now. It's too distracting. So you have like a whole cross-quarter period to get your. Actually, it's a cross-quarter. It's 2 cross-quarter to get your stuff arranged and put away, and then. So what happens is. They say that Drei Eckhart, or the loyal servant of Holla, the German psychopomp. I always love being able to use that word psychopomp. It's kind of fun. Goes ahead of the parade and warns the living of the impending fury coming behind him. And there are some descriptions of some of the things that have been on the wild hunt before, like a leg that was walking by itself. A 3-legged horse, that seems to be a very common one. A wounded man carrying another wounded man. Well, actually, they're both dead, but a worse wounded man on his shoulders. There's a whole bunch of these kinds of things, and I would love to incorporate those into the Parade of Spirits that we do in December, just before Yule. But I'm not so good at being able to create a leg that just kind of moves on its own. But anyway, so Eckhart is leading the whole parade and warning the living of it coming, because the parade can kill you. if I could shut this one Facebook window. Right. So next. There we are. Okay. Anyway, so what he does is he takes them, the hunt lands at Hexafeld. What it does there, we don't actually know, but apparently there is a witches' dance there, and that at some point long ago there were these witches dance circles in the grass or the grasslands or whatever of that area. That's a heavy farming area, and maybe it was a crop circle, but then it continues on, and it's making a slow progression over 12 nights. We don't actually have anything assigned to a particular day, but it's moving up further and further up from the flatlands to the Piedmont and into what we call mountains, which, you know, those of you out west would be like, that's a mountain. But I always remind people, the Appalachian Mountains are very old, and they have very old spirits that have seen a lot, and, you know, some of them are irritable and they don't want to, you know, they just want to be left alone. And others join into this, you know, this dance when it comes back every year. So then the next place it goes is a place called Hexabotic. I'll type that out too. Hexabotic. Hexabotic means witch mountain. Actually, it means witches mountain. And it's right along a road in near what is it, near Virginville? Behind Virginville, Pennsylvania, this road called Witchcraft Road. And the reason it's called Witchcraft Road is because of this lore of Hexabotic being a site for this witches' dance landing there. And which I actually think is kind of cool. And actually, one year, Kevin French and Heidi Streich and I actually camped out in a field where we got permission from the farmer to camp out, and on Witchcraft Road on April 30th, just to see what would happen. And I got to tell you, we got kind of creeped out because the only place to go to the bathroom was in a little patch of woods, and when you got to the little patch of woods, there were all these kind of like composted cow carcasses, and it was kind of gross. I don't know that it was the proper way to dispose of them either. But then they're all journeying up further and further to a place called Hexenkopf, and it's actually called Hexakopf in Pennsylvania Dutch, but the formal name of it is Hexenkopf, which means witch's head. Hexenkopf in Dutch. Now, that place has reports of strange goings on since the colonial era, where a woman in white would appear to people as they were traveling through, and would ask to get a ride with them if they were in a carriage or in a car, and she'd disappear. They have these ponds there, or these what do they call them? I'm sorry, thinking the wrong language all of a sudden. They have these ponds there, and they used to see her there combing her hair, which is definitely a facet of Holla, and probably something that, you know, came over with the settlers. But then what else? Oh, and the place does have some odd magnetic magnetic oddities and erratic magnetic behavior there. A lot of places do this. It's a little higher than a lot of other places. Magnets can do strange things, and compasses can go a little screwy sometimes. And Holla, by the way, is associated with magnetism. And there were magnetite mines on Hexenkopf. So it just works into a little, little ball of yarn. But then sometime in the 19-teens, I think, they opened up Hexenkopf and some of these ponds, or these well springs, to people to come to get healed, because the ponds had healing qualities. Well, actually, what the ponds actually really had was radon, and and two of the ponds have radon in them, and they're not the ponds that we visit. There's several ponds up there, but the ones that we know to be the ones from the lore are all in one place, and the other two are right over the property line, and they definitely are. They definitely are interesting because they're kind of still. There's really no, I don't see any current on them or anything, and there's a lot of skunk cabbage everywhere. And then we, I guess Beck saw it first. The groundhog arrangement. I don't think I actually saw it because I really didn't feel like seeing it, but it looked like there was some sort of ritual disposal of groundhogs, which, by the way, would not be something that we would do. So, you know, a lot of people go to Hexenkopf because of the lore of this woman and some of the other lore that comes out of it, including that healing things. There's still people who think that they can go into the radon pools and get their cancers cured. Maybe it would work. I don't know, fight fire with fire, but I have a feeling it might make things worse. Right, so yeah, magnetism is interesting, and how Holla has that association, I'm not even sure. It could maybe, you know, it could be that Hexenkopf actually gave that association to her, but I don't know. That a lot of that magnetism stuff comes from eastern Pennsylvania, but it also came from Ohio. And actually western Pennsylvania too. So it's a strange place. You'll go up there. You'll be on the top of the pillar, looking out over Williams Township down below, and all the farms and everything. And there will be trees that are upside down right next to you. And you're like, how did this tree even get here, and how did it get to be upside down? Because if it would have fallen, it would have fallen down, not up. And it's very bizarre. It's an interesting place. We're supposed to try to do a pilgrimage every year, but really it should be on April 30th or May 1st, and that can't always happen realistically because, you know, we have these things called day jobs, and they don't always fall on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday. But I do like the idea of it, and we do it when we can. Did we have that set up this year? I can't remember. I don't remember what day. Hey, Doug, on the calendar, April 30th is what day? And it's a Thursday. So, and besides that, I don't know if we'll be allowed out of our houses then. But so once they arrive at Hexenkopf, that's when Holla and Bertha meet, and they do this dance that kind of sends these whirlwinds out, and these energetic whirlwinds, really, and they dance winter away, and they wake up the spirits of the planets that are dormant. And it's actually a nice myth, and I can actually envision it when I'm there. You know, sometimes when you're standing up there at Hexenkopf, you'll get this wind that is kind of like a whirlwind. It's not like a tornado or anything, but it's this strong wind that comes at you and then comes around, and that wind is associated with Holla in the form of the spiral or the helix, as Victoria has analogized. But the place where we actually do our rituals is it's in an outcropping or just erosion, I guess. There's a rock in the middle of this little area that's open, and that rock has almost a flat top and makes a perfect altar, and the wind's going over your head rather than through the outcropping. And it is a cool place, and if people ever get a chance to come to Pennsylvania, they should, you know, try to see if they can get up there. It's April 30th is a pretty good time to go because it's not overgrown yet. By the time that you get into May and June, it's it's harder to travel up, up to and find things because the growth is so thick. So once they do this dance, Holla goes and takes her seat up there, and meanwhile, Drei Eckhart goes down and leads the souls to the mill. So the mill. I guess I gotta talk about the mill. The mill is that's kind of the Urglaawe allegory for a soul-crushing death. Okay, on Holla has her realm. Her realm is down in Dunkelgegend, and that's where her cottage is, and several other things that are referred to in different parts of lore, such as the apple trees that come in the Frau Holla story. There's an apple orchard, and there's a summer kitchen or something like that that has that where they bake stuff, and that would be where the bread comes from in Frau Holla story. There's a field there called Bolvies, where Holla grows the flax that she gave to humans, and there's another place that we kind of we think we're actually beginning to understand it. It's called Weiberfeld, and I'm going to type that one out. It means the field of women. And we know it's important because our Lord tells us that Weiberfeld is very important. However, it doesn't really tell us why. And that's kind of annoying. But we have some ideas, and a couple of them are supported in theory throughout other parts of lore. The sickle that we use for the sacred symbol of Holla and the primary symbol of Urglaawe, sickles have evolved over time. They didn't always look. Hold on. Can you step up for 1 second to catch them? Sorry, they didn't always look like this. I think they started out in the like Stone Age or whatever as I'm not an anthropologist, so if somebody knows when they started, as really just kind of hewn rock and sharpened, and one report is that the adherents of Holla were women who would actually attach these blades to their feet and would harvest stuff for Holla just by walking through. And there are people who still use sickles in that fashion if they do hand tools. Because I got to tell you, bending over and trying to do all that is very rough. But if you're cutting down by your ankle's height anyway, it might be easier to do it that way. Now, while I have certainly worked on Mennonite farms that were pretty old school, I have to tell you that none of them was actually using a hand sickle for harvesting corn, but that does not mean that other parts of the garden aren't doing it. And I would actually choose a scythe over that. But so the report is the one piece that we actually have is that the Weiberfeld is where the women who served Holla, that's their reward. That's where they go when they die. They go through the mill, but they come. Their higher self comes back and stays there with Holla, which isn't that much different from the slaying going to Freya or to Odin. So that kind of fits, but apparently it's not just women. That men can end up there too, but lore tends to go. Came out of older days where most of the things that they were doing in Holla's name were associated more with the role of women in society. The men do and actually have collected flax and harvested flax, but the whole use of flax is highly associated with as a female industry in traditional Pennsylvania culture. and but I kind of like the reference to men who served Holla being there as well, because I don't know. I this is a personal opinion, but as we've seen, our societies are what dictates a lot of these things. And as a homelessman and somebody who's worked very hard for Holla over the years, I would like to think that I would have a place there if so chosen. I don't know. That's just my own take. Sophia, I have a broken side in my garden, in my shed in my garden. Well, it could be. Michelle just made a point that maybe it's indicative of matriarchal society, and it could be. I kind of wish that we didn't have either patriarchal or matriarchal. We just had, I don't know, something that wasn't so based in gender, or sex. But that's just my personal take, because But the funny thing is that the primary deity, or the foremost deity in Urglaawe, is a goddess, and our goddesses tend to be really loud. Bertha's driving me with this whole tower thing, and Holla's driving Michelle, which is kind of, I was actually worried that Holla was upset with me about something, because she, normally she's the one I would talk to, but but we have other, our goddesses are, fried with the whole Entstehung thing, just very upfront and present, and Caesar with Caesar Sega, which started out as kind of a small event, but it's one that a lot of people look forward to. It's oftentimes paired with Arentfest because they're only a week apart, but these goddesses are amazing. I don't know. Just trying to think of the other holidays. Any that we don't have a goddess who's being honored alongside a god. We probably should, because we actually have a whole bunch of deities that we have bits and pieces on from either German or Pennsylvania Dutch lore, and we don't really honor them. Well, we do, but we just don't do it as often as we should. Okay, so just trying to think, because we tend to honor multiple deities at each of the holidays, because we can't get together enough to be doing daily rituals and honoring different deities. That would be awesome, though, like big commune, and we all live together in different parts of it, and we all come together every morning. It'd be just like the movie Midsummer. I'm sure we could find somebody to be offering in the temple. All right, so sorry, I'm in a post-migraine mood right now, which is actually a pretty good one. All right, so then Bertha and the Parade of Spirits they go down to the mill, and they get ground up. The souls go through the mill. The name of the millstone is a Selbrecher, which means the soul breaker. And I should mention that Holla has in the wild hunt, or the Parade of Spirits, our Lord tells us that Holla's chariot, or not chariot, Holla's wagon is being pulled by the spirits of three large oxen, and those oxen are whatever. Holla actually does go down into the. She goes along with the Drei or Eckhart down to the mill, and she sends them through, and Bertha picks them up on the other side. And after all, it is her house. But so they guide the souls through, and they get ground down. Now, the funny thing is that, oh my gosh, it would have been next weekend. Next weekend, I was supposed to be giving a presentation on the Urglaawe concepts of the soul. And but obviously this insane virus thing, or the insane virus, actually I think insane, it's the one where viruses do, but kind of move sacred space out. And I'm kind of upset about that, but by the same token, it also means I didn't have to learn our whole remote system for school while preparing this. And the whole concept of heathen soul lore is very complicated and very interesting, because it seems to vary from culture to culture. Now, I'm very fortunate to have had Winifred Hodge Rose, who's done a lot of work on heathen soul lore. She's probably one of the best versed in it, and so luckily she and I met at Trothmoot a couple years ago, and we kind of talked about this a bit. And so when I decided I was going to do this presentation, I asked her where I could get hold of some of her research, and she sent it to me, which was very kind. So I'm going to be looking through this, and I'm going to be comparing and contrasting it against what against what we know. And I don't know them off the top of my head, so I'm not even going to go into it right now. But they are described in the Dictionary of Urglaawe Terminology, and some of them are things that, like, I would not initially think are. Actually, hold on, I'll just look that up. Because a whole lot of other stuff comes out of this. And pretty much everything within the Deutsch systems, even if they were broken, this area may not have had a piece of lore, but this area had that piece of lore, you know, and it connected stuff over here when we got them together. Okay, so I'm trying to find something. I'm just looking up the dictionary here. I'm a bad seaver. I don't know all the parts of the soul. Of course, half those words I never even heard of in Deutsch until the Hexerei practitioners told them to me, because they are not common words. Bueller. Okay, here it comes. All right, so still opening. My internet is sluggish. I guess everybody's at home, live streaming videos, and okay, let's see. So the full year. Here we go. Down the alphabet. Alright, so here we go. So this is from, do I have to cite it since I wrote it? Page 56 of the Dictionary of Urglaawe Terminology. Die Seele, the soul. The soul is an amazingly complex concept in Germanic lore. In seeking a cogent and coherent depiction of the multifaceted soul of humans, the authors came across many conflicting references in European and Deutsch lore. Regarding the soul, one thing that all heathen groups seem to, anyway, have in common is an understanding that the soul, unlike the physical body, like the physical body, is composed of multiple parts. The reported number ranges from 3 to 12 parts. Urglaawe generally conceptualize the soul as having 12 parts. And parts of the physical body do not decay at the same rate after death, neither do the parts of the soul. Although there are some differences between the Urglaawe and the Theodish understanding of the soul, we are indebted to Leon Wild for his Runes workbook, and we need to check into that lore to make sure it's all, you know, that there's. I don't know much about the they're about Eric Wodening, but they had provided us with information of their understanding, and we were able to kind of match up some of the things in ours, and it just helped kind of confirm that some of the information we were getting from the practitioners actually was based in something. So they presented their soul knowledge in a concise format, saving us a significant amount of legwork and analysis. So, the Geist, that's literally the ghost, is a subset of the soul. From the Urglaawe perspective, 10 parts of the soul constitute the Geist. They are the portions that relate to the ethereal self, the light relates to the physical self, and the fetch is able to separate from the rest of the soul for journey work. Got a typo in there. At death, the fetch may attach itself to other souls. The portion of the soul that is most likely to get reborn in subsequent generations are the Hoch, Orleg, and Glick. We'll talk about those as we go along here. This does not mean that other portions or the entirety of the soul can never be reborn. It simply means that more research must be conducted to understand the mysteries of the soul. So, I'm going to have to post this page to the Urglaawe group when we're done. But, so one of the parts of the soul we call Der Oschdret, which, by the way, is also the name for the Othala rune, or its equivalent anyway, in our rune system. And that's the breath of life. The breath of life is part of your soul, and that you are born with now. The God started it, but it is part of the soul and goes on in the constructs that come out from the mill. Der Seelhaut is the soul skin. It takes the shape of the physical body, though some entities can shapeshift. This is the most frequently seen manifestation of what we call a ghost. All right. Der Hoch. This is the higher self. Intellect and analytical abilities. Der Maya. That's the spiritual energy or life force and energy that pervades all life. This is the energy that we use for healing in Braucherei, and it is strongly associated with Weißkeppige Frau, who lives in the Eastern Leaves, which is the realm in which Maya comes from on the world tree. Es Gemüt is the total self, including one's general disposition or mood. Der Mind or der Sinn, their memories and ancestral qualities that are passed by the soul. You can inherit issues of the mind, you can inherit issues of the body, or stronger bodies from the forebears. You can also inherit things in your soul from their forebears. Es Orleg, which most people would probably recognize as the cognate of Orlog, is the primal layer or individual law, the hand that we are dealt at birth, and it records the actions throughout one's life. Der Wille is the force of will, the capability to cause something to occur, and self-determination. Die Gewut is the inspiration or passions, and that is associated with Wudan, or that is our name for Odin. The two are not exactly the same in perception, but they definitely share the same root. Es Glick is a repository of luck and personal power accumulated throughout one's life. Die Leich, and this is the one that I think is most peculiar, is the physical body. Okay, so the physical body is at least somehow connected to the soul, and that's because the soul actually permeates it. When this first came up, and I heard this part of the soul from at least 30, respondents. I don't know the exact number, but it was very common, and all they would tell me is that this was part of the soul because the soul permeated the physical body. So it's actually really not the physical body; it's the permeation of the soul of the physical body. And der Folger or Defolieren, which is the guardian spirit or the journeyer, known as the fetch. Now, funny thing about that is there's a belief in some systems that the Folger is always of the opposite gender of the physical person, and I don't actually believe that to be the case. Having met mine really was definitely not female, but it wasn't really male either. It was like something that I feel like people were trying to impress our gender understandings on these beings who may appear differently to different people. And now the Fuller actually has a fair amount of sovereignty in our lore. You build a relationship with them once you're aware of them, and if you're not aware of them, there are meditations that actually, I think that one of the better ones came out of the where I studied runes, which was the Denali Institute of Northern Tradition. It had a good one. That's actually how I really met my Fuller directly. And after that, I now know how to make offerings and to talk to my Fuller, and also, theoretically, send my Fuller on errands. Not like I've ever done that for anything, but yes, because in Brockerai, especially in Hexerai, your Fuller can be a major tool in particularly remote healing. So but the Fuller, if the Fuller is in a soul construct of a person who's doing all sorts of awful things, the Fuller actually can abandon the person, and that's supposed to be kind of like the height of bad luck. It's like losing the steering wheel in your car while you're driving, and I kind of want to look into that lore someday more, because I think that it would actually make for some pretty good stories. I think that we have a couple background. There was one place where somebody gave me an example, and I kind of need to convert it because she was using Dutch terms that were like, they were terms that I wasn't particularly familiar with because they became obsolete like 70 years ago, and so it's kind of like when you see these things on Facebook, do you know these 15 1880s words? It's the slang of that era, and a couple of those words I didn't know, and I wrote them down. I need to go through and update that, but in my copious spare time. But it would make for good stories because they were definitely lessons, and they were usually about people who were stealing from people, particularly store clerks and proprietors who were ripping off their customers. That's considered to be a high breach of trust, and or also farmers who were dealing not in good faith with stores, or stores that were dealing not in good faith with farmers. These pieces of info often reflect something that was going on in society that people consider to be a problem. But the Fuller can abandon, and once that's done, that person's life is essentially going to shit. It's not, you don't want to lose your guardian or your journeyer. So, all right. So what I'll do is I'll take a screenshot of that part of the book, and I'll post it to the Urglaawe group later so you can all see it. I wasn't expecting to go into that topic, but I figured talk about it. So they go into the mill, and that big grindstone grinds the soul down into these 12 individual parts, and assuming that they all made it here, because some of them, when they die, they get split up here. I really had a really rough experience years ago where somebody I knew died, and I had to go into the house as clergy and deal with the energies that were in there. And it became quite clear to me that part of his soul was there, and it was dazed and confused, and it didn't have like a full functioning set of this is hard to talk about, of faculties that I could address things to, and because the rest of the soul went off on the hunt, but this part was stuck here. It was stuck here as kind of one of those cold energies that you feel when you're dealing in a place that's quietly haunted. And if I had to guess, I would guess that the part of this, and this is a sheer guess, but just based on what it was, I would have to say that it was probably the mind or the sin, which is the memories and ancestral qualities, because it just felt like it felt like his family to me, and that's total conjecture. And so the way I handled it, and it did seem to work, was I talked to it and told it to jump into a picture of him, and that we would pass that along for funerary rites, and that's what we did. That's one of those energy transfer things that comes out of Braucherei and Hexerei that becomes very helpful sometimes. But so they can end up here, at my cemetery, and this is kind of weird, but at my cemetery there is supposed to be a victim of the 1918 Spanish flu. Unfortunately, our property was a cemetery, so we have a mass grave on there. We don't even know how many people or who they are. But apparently this girl was one of them. And she's never done this to me, which is kind of weird. But she's done it to other people, and a lot of other people. People who don't know each other. And people say, what's that girl on your property? Where she will sometimes manifest herself to somebody and ask them, in Pennsylvania Dutch, by the way, although if they speak English, I don't know, maybe they'll hear it differently. But because I don't think anybody in our group's seen it either. I think somebody sensed something but didn't see her. And she comes up and she asks for her, if anybody knows where her left foot is. And she is walking somehow, floating, I guess, without a left foot. And sure enough, we do know there actually is a left foot, a disembodied left foot, from that mass grave, but it was separated somehow. It's next to the mass grave somewhere in the ground. So that's kind of interesting. And I mean, I've heard about her growing up, but I've never seen her. And meanwhile, every other ghost that's trolling a street somewhere, comes up and finds me. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't like that I took over the property. So meanwhile, as I continue to ramble, so some of these things are stuck here, and that's on Groundhog Day and Allerliebeziel. That's when Brauchers and some hexes, but that's a big Braucherei time. That's when they go and try to help find these spirits and move them along back to the hunt in one way or the other. Because those are the nights that the veil is thin. For me, actually, the larger of the two is actually really Groundhog Day. I don't know why, but I actually come across more on Groundhog Day than ever. And and Groundhog Day at Kutztown University, when I was with other Brauchers, and we sensed that our sensibilities were being magnified by each other. That was kind of weird. But so the soul then is crushed down in the Dunkelgegen, and out comes these split up souls, and then they are reconstructed. Now, some forms of it say that they come out of the mill reconstructed already, but I don't think that's the case. I think that the reconstruction actually happens separately, but it's not explicitly stated anywhere that I remember offhand. But then Berchtesgaden is now in charge of them, and they go up to the Untergegen and await rebirth. But so that is that's how the story of the Wonnezeit ends. But right after there's another story that it seems to take 12 days for the frost giants to come from the northern leaves down to where we live here in Mannheim. On the 12th, well, the night of the 12th of May, which is actually really the 13th of May, since we start our days at sundown, is the first frost giants attack, and this is where your Butzemann from really comes in handy. They say that this first giant, his name is Drei Dachs, or 13 Badger. he comes and is attempting to destabilize the order that is being reestablished by Ho's presence in this realm. And now, traditionally, there's actually two different versions of this, and the Christians tend to leave the one out completely, but it's quite strong. It's kind of funny. They'll leave out the fact that Duna or Thor fights the frost giant on the 13th, but yet they'll credit the Busamon for it. So that instead of an old Germanic god, they'll accept the zombie voodoo doll doing it. I honestly, Stevie, why there are 12 days, I don't know. 12 is a sacred number, but trying to track all that down, it could be seasonally related. I mean, because technically our observances are almost like a season that are split up, because even once Entstehung ends, you're still in this Entstehungszeit afterwards, just like Yule and Yulezeit. I mean, technically Entstehung's period doesn't end until Oschdret begins, but the actual observance is that 12-day window. Well, it's most of the lower multiples of 3 are sacred. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18. 15 less so than the others for some reason. But it's also not. I mean, 9 is highly sacred, and 18 is also sacred because it's a multiple of 9. No, that's probably me just moving my hands. I can't sit still. So, how did I get on that subject? I got distracted by the cat thing. Alright, so, I already forgot what I was talking about. Yeah, the 12. So, yeah, because, let's see, we have, for 12-day, I mean, the most clearly established across heathen pass is actually Yule. So, and that, 12 days of Christmas, 12 days of Yule. But Entstehung is 12 days. And it's a good thing, too, because Entstehung is so packed with stuff to do that if you try to do it all in one day, you'd probably die. Oschdret is 3 days, but, technically, we theoretically could, morph that to have Sieg Dog be the last day of Oschdret, and there is 12 days. But, I'd rather leave it the way it is. Hoyt is 12 days. But Hoyt's actually longer than that, because Hoyt is I'm going to say that for another time, because I'm going to get distracted and I'm way out in the weeds. We'll talk about some of the observance names and the time periods. Let's put that down for something at the next one. So anyway, Duna is actually credited with beating back that first frost giant. Now, the next night, another one comes. Vatsefera. Alright, so let me type out Drei docs. 13 Badger. Okay, and Vatsefera. Vatsefera was always very confusing because it doesn't really seem to mean anything proper in current Dutch. It literally means, if you took it at its literal value, well, I gotta get all the names typed out because I'm only going with them all in one line. Vatsefera is 14 quills. And Fimse Fuchs. 15 Fox. So, Vatsefera. When I first heard that, and actually everybody who first heard in our Urglaawe guild, as they were learning from the mentors, they're like, that means 14 fathers. why would fathers be attacking as frost giants? And it actually took me a long time to solve this, but it turns out that in one area of Drei, there is a variant where the word feta is derived from the, meaning quill in this case, is the same as like a bird feather, but they actually spell it differently out there. They spell it with a V instead of an F, which V and F both make the same sound. But so them doing that, I was like, oh, so that might be it. It's a porcupine, and that took a long time. That took like I was hunting for information on that for probably since 2009, no, 2008 actually, and I think I only really got the answer to that 2 years ago, because I didn't come across anybody who spoke that particular variant, and but I did. That was out in Newport in Perry County, which there's a lot of information from that region. So anyway, that is when Fatsefera attacks. Now Donos teaches the Butsaman or the Butsaman army how to fight him, and I kind of like the imagery of this. Some people say that he teaches the individual Butsaman to fight by himself. Others say that no, he teaches the collective, all the Butsamena that are out there, and teaches them all to fight as a unit against frost giants while still patrolling as individuals. And so I just pictured this like army of scarecrows, which would terrify the hell out of people, especially right in the middle of May. And I kind of want to dress up sometime as an army of Butsamena and just go, roaming through the streets of some unsuspecting village. But it'd be kind of fun. We actually thought about doing that in New Jerusalem, but who knows? Anyway, so then the next night comes 15 Fuchs, 15 Fox. Now 15 Fox, they all come different ways down the tree, and we have a description of that somewhere. That there are multiple ways to come down out of the northern leaves, and they avoid Himmelgegen and they avoid Hohegegen by going like off these side branches and stuff, which is kind of an interesting piece of lore. I gotta dig that up. I think I posted it somewhere. But so Fimse Fuchs does his attack, but this time it's the Butsaman or the Butsaman army that actually does the fighting. And now your Butsaman is all ready to go and ready to handle anything that comes his way. Then, okay, so Fimse Fuchs comes on the night of May 14th into May 15th. So on our tradition is that on May 15th, that is when it is now safe to put out your tender plants. A lot of people follow Mother's Day. I think it's actually possibly rooted in this kind of story. Maybe not from our culture, but there must be similar stories in other cultures. Yes, there you go. Tonight at 10, Army of Zombie Plant Spirits roams Philly. Although, to be honest, that's really not that much different from any other news report out of Philly. All right, so it's a big observance, and it has a pilgrimage involved if you can make it that year, in any given year. And you're seeing goddesses in action. You're meeting our German psychopomp. You're hearing about souls getting crushed down, and kind of learning potential origins of some ghost stories and things like that. So that is our Wonnezeit, our time of joy, in a nutshell. Now, I also saw somebody said something about Hexenacht. You can say Hexenacht, yes. But the thing is that it's not just about the hexes. And it's about the whole joy that's coming to the entire world from being woken up from the winter slumber. Hexenacht would actually be April 30th, but Wonnanacht is at that same time. That's when that joy is coming in, I think that you could ask some of us. A lot of us have been up to Hexenkopf, and it's a hike. Like I mean, it's not even that high of a mountain pillar, but it's very rocky, very old, very overgrown, and so it is challenging to walk the quarter-mile from where you might be able to park your vehicle. My Suburban has a little trouble fitting there, to this area where we actually hold the ritual. And I think that once you get there, it's kind of worth it. But when you're going through it, especially the first time, and the first time that I did the hike, I had gone there with somebody else who knew the lore and was telling me while we were going out there, and he grew up in that area. And when I went back on April 30th, he took me in February. When I went back on April 30th, it didn't look the same because in February there were no greens on the trees, and when I came, I couldn't find it. I'm sitting there looking at all these different potential piles of huge rocks, and couldn't find it. I lost my cell phone there though, and which is kind of weird because I got, I swear we got weird phone calls on our home phone from it, but it's just joking. So anyway, that's an introduction to Wonnezeit. Now, anybody have any questions about anything? Floor is open. We got about, I want to end at 8:30, so a few minutes. I don't care if we go a little bit over. I'm just not feeling all that great. Any questions? Because I haven't been able to read the chat. Yeah, and by the way, if you are and I violated this, I kind of violated this rule myself tonight. If you are pursuing Urglaawe as your religion, I do try to encourage you to learn the Dutch names of the realms and soul parts and stuff along with the English. And I know we need to put up more of the pronunciation things because it doesn't always make sense. But like I just use the term northern leaves instead of nadbladder because if I said nadbladder, people are like, what? But we do want to try to use our deity names in our own understanding because there is, even though they're rooted in the same God, like our perception of Wodan is very different from the perception of Odin. They have a lot of the same features, but they're just not exactly the same. And they're the same God, yes. Like I could, if I went to if somebody came to our a ceremony where we were hailing Wodan and hailed Odin, it would not be like a huge insult, no. But we are a threatened culture still, even though our numbers are growing because of Amish and Mennonite birth rates. But they're also not pursuing the pagan paths so much. But and we want to make sure that we keep what the original parts of the lore were, and most of the stuff was in Dutch. Not all of it. Like the stories I wrote in English actually, because I had all the information in Dutch and harmonized them. But I was like presenting this mostly to an English-speaking audience. But there are a few that I have only in Dutch. They're not hugely impacting on the Urglaawe philosophy, but so like we want to start to get away from being dependent on people's understanding of the Norse deities in order for them to understand the Urglaawe deities. So, like I still say sometimes Frauva and then put in parentheses Freya because I want people to understand. And the thing is, my gift exchange that went awry and ended up with all these cats like this one here, started under the name of Freya because we were still researching Frauva at that point. And so I in that context, I still use the name Freya because that's who I had dealt with it. But Frauva, we're beginning to understand more of her presence in our lore. The name was not clear, but there was clearly a goddess, associated with Grumbiradog and the awakening of some parts of the garden, particularly the rooted plants. And so, same with Fried. We weren't sure the name of Fried at first, and so we are actually going with Freya, and which looks like it's spelled like Frigg. But then I came across multiple interviewers who multiple interviewees who said that there was this name of Fride, who was the wife of Udon and the guardian of the home, and and I wasn't too sure of that right away. And then von Schoenberg's hold on a second, Book of Myths came out, fairy tales came out. Come on, this Franz Xavier von Schoenberg's The Turnip Princess. Which I'm betting Sarah could, post in the could post a link to in the chat area in a matter of seconds. And then in here, and I always have trouble finding it because they have so many of it. It's on page 171. Wherever that is. We have the story of Wouden Fride. And now the funny thing is, this story actually has portions of both Frigg's and Freya's lore in it. Instead of tears of amber, they're tears of pearl, which actually there's another fairy tale that comes just a couple pages after it that's called Pearl Tears. There's still research that we got to do on some of these things, but so since we had already Fride turning up as a name for Frigg in some areas where Hexerei practitioners were practicing, and then it turns up in this established German book, we're like, okay, well, you know what, we're going to switch it to our own native name, even though I never heard it before. The problem with Fride, of course, is you start talking about Fride and people are like, Fride what? And I'm like, but, so, we do have work to do on the language. The thing is, we tried language instruction over the internet, and everybody's just so busy that it just didn't work out. And we probably need to revisit it at some point. And quite honestly, Urglaawe is going to have its own kind of dialect, its own jargon, because we are addressing things using terms that do exist, but they might mean something different, or some terms have been flat out coined, or some have been borrowed from specific jargon within Hexerei or Brauerei, and some have been backformed from German, from Palatinate German. So it's a work in progress, but I have to tell you that I'm very thankful to everybody who's come to the Urglaawe group and maintained interest. We're still working on that book, by the way. It would help if I hadn't gotten sick and all sorts of other stuff. We actually were originally planning on having it done by Sacred Space, but now Sacred Space is not even happening at the moment. But yeah, we all need to kind of crack down on that leadership. We all need to start getting back to that book. The thing is, though, it turns out that we have so much lore because it's still a living tradition. Even if the people aren't honoring the helpful entities as gods, some of these names have been never left the culture. I mean, Hull has been called up in Brauerei, Bercht has been called up in Hexerei and Brauerei. And they've been in both. Dona is associated with cattle moving days. I mean, so having this living lore, but having different parts of it stronger in one area and then another. When you start going out to these places and interviewing these people, and you start discovering the things that are linked between, you end up with a lot of information. And I keep thinking that I've exhausted my notes, and then something comes up, and I go, remember, and then all of a sudden it rings a bell. Oh, you know what? I remember that. That was some lady mentioned something about that. We have two names for earthquake giants, and but I can't find much information out about them. But I have the names. That apparently, when one of them, when he gets very angry, he starts stomping on the ground to cause an earthquake. So. We have all sorts of lore that still needs to come out. So, again, does anybody have any final questions? Were there any questions I missed or anything? You did? All right, well, I guess we'll end it then. Thank you again for coming. I'm sorry I'm a little bit spacey, but, you know, yeah. Migraines do that to you. Although it was actually a short-lived migraine. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. And I think we'll try to schedule another one for next week. Not sure when. I don't know how many of us are working from home and how many of us actually have to go out in the community to serve as essential employees. Those of you who do, you have our gratitude. It's, you know, it worries me how so many people are put at risk just by the nature of their jobs. And I tend to think mostly of the grocery store clerks who didn't sign up for that. You know, they didn't think that they were going to be on the front lines of a calamity, but a lot of them are still going to work. Some of them are switching roles so that elderly employees can be in a safer area, and I kind of admire all that. All right, so we'll look at maybe next week. Let's see. Spring break starts for me on Wednesday. Maybe we'll do it then. I don't know. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And if you have questions that come out of this, you can post in the Urglaawe group or give us an opportunity to talk about stuff. All right? Dankjewel en maak ze maar best wel.